What's up guys, I'm Chirag and welcome to this video tutorial. In this tutorial, I will take you through on how to receive or send an alert or any notification when any user modifies the S3 bucket ACL, that is access control list, for any public access. So here, we know that based on certain use case, we might require the bucket to be public. So here we are not restricting any user from modifying the bucket's permission, but as an administrator or a root user, one should be aware of such modification so that he or she can take appropriate action in case anything goes wrong, right? So here I have come up with a quick flow diagram that we are going to follow throughout this tutorial, right? So let's quickly go through it. So here we have the user, so it can be any DevOps user or a cloud user who is modifying the permission of the S3 bucket, and those events will be recorded by the service that is CloudTrail, and those recorded events will be passed on to the CloudWatch. So within CloudWatch, we are going to create a rule and we will filter those events based on these three conditions, that if it is put bucket public access block, or it is public bucket ACL, or it's the create bucket event, then only we will trigger the Lambda function. We will pass on that information from CloudWatch log to the Lambda function, and within this Lambda function we will have certain logic which will basically send an email notification, or which will basically invoke the SNS service, and it will push the notification to the SNS, right? And finally we will have this email which will be received by the end user. So here we are having an email at this point of time, but it can be anything. It can be an HTTP endpoint, right? So it can be a Slack notification or the text message notification, or it can be anything, right? So you can replace this part as per your requirement, correct? So this is the overall thing that we are going to cover in this tutorial. So here below I have the steps that we are going to follow. So we will start with the creation of the SNS topic, followed by the creation of the subscription. Then we will create the trail within the CloudTrail service, followed by the creation of the IAM role for the Lambda function, which will again followed by the creation of the Lambda function. And within Lambda function, we will have certain logic to basically filter certain things and send out an notification or publish a message, right? And then finally, we will configure the CloudWatch rule to filter out these three events. So now let's get started. So the very first thing that we are going to do is create the SNS topics. So navigate to AWS Management Console, search for SNS, open that service. Now once you are within simple notification service, click on topics from the left panel, say create topic from the top right corner, give it a name. I will say S3 public, and rest of the option I will leave it as it is, and I will say create topic. So here we have successfully created the topic. Now within topic we need to create the subscription, so I will say create subscription. Now here within protocol it can be anything based on your requirements, so it can be HTTP, HTTPS, email, SQS, or Lambda, right? So here I am going to select email because I want to send the email notification, and within endpoint it's going to be the email ID. So in my case it's chiragar83@gmail.com, right? And once you are done with this configuration, say create subscription. Now once the subscription is created, you will receive the confirmation email. So at this point of time, it will show the status as pending confirmation. So you need to go to that email, right? And you need to confirm that. So it will look something like this, and you need to click on this confirm subscription. So I will say confirm, and here it will say subscription confirmed. So it's kind of the acknowledgement. Now we can go back to SNS, and if I go ahead and reload this, then the status should change now. So now it says confirmed, right? So we are done with the first two steps, that is creation of the SNS topic followed by the creation of the subscription, and we even confirm that subscription, right? Now the third step is to create the trail within the CloudTrail service. So again, navigate back to AWS Management Console and click on Services, search for CloudTrail. Now, once you are within CloudTrail Management Console, you can directly say create a trail, or you can click on this button from the top left corner and you can navigate to dashboard. Now from here, you need to click on create trail. Now give it a name. I will say probably S3 log, right? And it will store all the logs, all the events within the S3 bucket. You can create a new bucket or you can use an existing bucket. So I will say use an existing bucket. I will certainly search for trail. So I will select AWS Cloud Trail. I will say choose. If you want to add certain prefix of the directory, then you can do that. I will leave it as it is. Now we have log file SSEKMS encryption. For now, I will uncheck this. Now here, CloudWatch logs is optional. We will leave it as it is. In fact, we will leave rest of the option as it is, and we will say next. Now here we have three types of events. So it says management events, data events, and insights events. So to log the event like create bucket or delete bucket or ACL or the events regarding to access control list, we need to opt out for management events. Now in case if you want to log the data that is being performed at the object level within the bucket, then you also need to opt out for data events, right? So for now we will go with the management events. Within management events, we will check read write. If you want to exclude AWS KMS events, then you can check this box, right? So we will go with the management events with read and write and click on next. Now, once you are done with this, you can review your configuration and say create trail. Now we have successfully created the trail within the CloudTrail service. Now the fourth step is to create the IAM role. So again, go back to AWS Management Console, click on Services, look for IAM. Now once you are within IAM Management Console, click on Roles from the left panel and say Create Role. Select Lambda as a service because we are creating this role for the Lambda function. Say Next. So here we need access to the S3 bucket as well as the SNS service, right? So we will look for Lambda execute. So this will basically give permission for the CloudWatch logs and also put and get access to the S3 bucket, right? Apart from that, we will require SNS. Now, once you're done with this, click on next. Give it a tag if you want, say next review. Give it a role name. I will say Lambda underscore S3 underscore public. And I will say create role. Now we have successfully created the IAM role. So the next step is to create the Lambda function, correct? So navigate back to AWS Management Console, click on Services, search for Lambda. Now, once you're within Lambda Management Console, click on Functions from the left panel and say Create Function. Give it a function name. I will say Lambda S3 public, something like that. I will select runtime as Python 3.8. Within permission, choose an existing role. Within role, select the role that we have just created. So it's going to be Lambda S3 public in my case and say create function. Now the Lambda function is created successfully. Scroll down to the function code. So here we are going to write some code. In fact, we will copy and paste the code from the GitHub. So I have this code posted on the GitHub. So the link is in the description, right? So I will quickly copy this code and paste it over there. Copy. And I will paste it over here. And I will say save this Lambda function. Now I will quickly take you through this code. So let's start from the import statements. So we will start from line number 7. So we are importing JSON as well as Boto3, right? And then on line number 10, we have the helper function. We will come to that later. So we will start with the lambda underscore handler, right? So here on line 72, we are printing an event to check what data we are getting within event, right? And then on line number 74, we are defining event data as a variable, and we are saying event.get details. So it's kind of a basic manipulation of the dictionary, right? So we are fetching the detail key from the event, right? And then on line 76, we are defining certain URI. So this URI basically stands for the all user group. And then similarly on line number 78, we have this another URI which stands for the auth user group, right? So we are going to use this URI to compare certain things, right? To probably define certain condition, right? And then on line number 80, we are defining event details. So here we are parsing and fetching required information. So here we are calling get event details method, and we are passing event data within that. So let's have a look at the event details. So let's have a look at the get event details method. So here we have, so we are accepting one parameter, that is event data. And here within event details, we are defining a dictionary, right? So here we are fetching the information like user type, event time, region, source IP, user agent, other parameters, and the bucket name. So we are fetching certain information from the dictionary that we are passing, right? So that was get event details. Now comes the crucial part, that is line number 82. So here we are checking whether the event type is put bucket public access block or not, right? So what does this mean? So let me open the S3 bucket. So I will randomly open any bucket, maybe this one, and I will click on permission. So here we have this block, right? That is block public settings, that is block public access, right? So whenever these settings are modified, then it will trigger the event that is put bucket public access block, right? So we are looking for that event, whether those things are being modified or not. If it is modified, then it will further go to line number 84. So here we are fetching the information of these 4 flags, right? So whether they are true or false, so we want to know that, right? So we are fetching that information on line number 84. And then on line number 86, we are checking whether any of the option is false, right? If any of the option is false, then we are calling send message method, and we are passing event details, subject, and message, right, to this method. So let's see what we have in this method, that is send message. So here we have that method, that is send message. So here we are passing event details, right? And we had defined subject and message as none because I had defined the standard subject and the message, right? So if you want to modify, then you need to pass it as a parameter, then it will consider that. But in case if those are none, if subject is none, right, then it's going to define this subject, that is S3 public permission alert for whatever bucket. And similarly for message, we are passing on this information as a part of the email. And then on line number 33, we are defining the client or the object of the SNS service. And then finally on line number 35, we are publishing the notification, that is sns.publish followed by the topic ARN. So we need to modify this ARN. So let's go back to SNS and copy the ARN. So you can set this topic ARN as a part of the environment variable of the Lambda function, correct? So that all you need to modify is the environment variable and not the code, right? So we will copy this ARN and I will replace this. I will paste it over here. And I will save this. followed by the message and the subject that we want to pass, right? So this was our send message method, right? So this block basically ends here. If we are getting the event, or if we are receiving put bucket public access block as an event, then we are performing this action, right? And now we have the second step, that is another event. We are checking for put bucket ACL. So if access control list is modified, right, then it will go to line number 93. So here it will fetch grant information. So within grant information, we will have information about who is getting what access, whether it is a read, write, or is it an authenticated user, or is it for all user, right? So those information you will get in grant details. Then on line number 95, I'm setting a flag that is false. I will come to that in a moment. Line number 97, we are checking the length of the grant, because the very first grant will be for the owner and we don't want to look at that, right? So if length of grant details is greater than 1, it means other information is there, right? So something or some permission is given to some other user, right? So we will look for that. Then we will loop through that grant details from the second, right, from the second record. And then we are checking the user group. So here we will get the URI, right? So which URI I'm talking about, that is something we are defined on line 76 and line number 78, right? We will check if that URI exists and that URI is equal to all user group or auth user group, right? So if it is the condition, then it will go to line number 103. Then here again we are checking grant.get permission. So which all permission is being given. So any of this permission exists within this list, then it will set the flag as true, right? Now once the flag is set as true, it will go to line number 108. It will check whether the flag is true or not. If it is true, then send the message. If it is false, then don't, right? So that's where we are defining flag equal to false on line number 95, right? Now then we have the create bucket event. So I will come to this part after some time, right? So we will leave this part. And then finally we have the return statement and we are done with the code, right? So let's go back to the steps that we had. So we have a SNS, we have subscription, we have trail, IAM role, Lambda function, and finally now we need to configure CloudWatch rule. So navigate back to the AWS Management Console, search for CloudWatch. Now once you are within CloudWatch Management Console, click on rules from the left panel under events. So here we are going to create a rule. So say create rule. Now here within service name, we are going to select S3, that is simple storage service. Then we have event type. So what type of event we need to grab? So it's going to be the bucket level operation, right? And here we have all the list of operation that can trigger the certain target, but we are going to select the specific operation. So that's going to be the create bucket, right? Then what was the another one? That was put bucket ACL. Then we have one more, that is put bucket public access block. Here we are, right? So you can select as many events you want based on the use case or based on certain things that you want to achieve, right? But for now we will go with create bucket, put bucket ACL, and the put bucket public access block, right? Now once you're done with this configuration, on the right side click on add targets. We will select the Lambda function, give it a function name. So we are going to select the function or the Lambda function that we have created. That's going to be the Lambda S3 public. And we are done with the creation of the rules. So say configure details, give it a name. I will say Lambda S3 public. And I will say create rule. Now if we look at the steps, then we have achieved all the steps. So let's get started. So the very first thing that we are going to do is navigate to S3, that is S3 Management Console. So here what we will do is I will open this bucket. I will go to permission. We'll try to change the configuration of block public access, right? So I will say edit. Maybe I will uncheck this and I will say save. I will say confirm, because in order to make any object public within the bucket, you need to change these settings first, right? So that's the reason we are tracking this event in the CloudWatch, and we have that logic or configuration within the Lambda function, right? So say confirm. And if everything is correct, then we should be receiving the email. So let's go to CloudWatch log and open the logs of this Lambda function. So click on monitoring, say view logs in CloudWatch. So here we have the event, right? So let's click on that. Let's see what we have. So here we have the event. So what kind of event we have? Let's check for the event name. So here we have the event name, that is put bucket public access is being modified. What is the modification? So you can look at restrict public buckets, right? So probably you can look for public access block configuration, and here you will find all the 4 flags, whether they are true or false, right? Now let me go ahead and check my email. So here we are, right? So I have received the email notification, that is S3 public permission alert for this bucket name. So you can double check from here. So this is the bucket name that we have, right? And what we have as the part of the email message, that is the bucket permission is modified, details below. So what was the user, or whom was the user that is modifying the permission? That is the root user, the event time, the region, the source IP, the user agent, right? So it's console, and we have other such information, and then we have other crucial information. Now within this other crucial information, we have this public access block configuration and the flags, right? So you can modify the message as you want, right? But I just define the standard thing so that we can have all the information, right? So that was basically the public access block configuration, right? Now we have another thing that is access control list, right? Now I will go back to S3 Management Console again. I will click on permission. I will select access control list. And here I will try to modify the public access. So I will select this everyone, and I will say they should be able to list object as well as write object, right? And I will say save. Now this should again trigger the Lambda function. So let's go back to CloudWatch first and check for logs. So as you can see here, we have the another event that is starting over here, and we have this event again. So let's check for the event type. So here we have the event name as put bucket ACL, right? And then we have the access control list and the grant information. And now I should be receiving the email regarding this. So let's have a look. So here we are. So I have this another email here, as you can see below. The bucket permission is modified under the same subject, right? But here within other crucial information, we have the information regarding to whatever the event is. So here we have 2 emails. Now coming to the third part, that is create bucket event. That is something I skipped while explaining the code, right? So let's go back to the Lambda function. So here on line number 112, we have the create bucket event, and what we are doing within that event. So we are defining the client for the S3 service, and then we are invoking a function, or we are calling a function that is client.put public access block, and whatever the bucket name, that we are getting within the event, and we are configuring the public access block configuration, and we are setting everything to true. So the reason that I'm doing this here, so let's have a look at the practical implementation. So I will go back to S3. I will click on Amazon S3. Now here I will click on create bucket. I will give it a name, some random name, and I will say next. I will leave the second option as it is, or the second step as it is. Click on next. Now here within set permission, we have this settings, right? So while we change this settings, we will not be receiving any event regarding to this. So if we check this or if we check this, then we will receive notification or the event, right? But if I uncheck everything, we will only receive the event as a part of the create bucket, right? So that's the reason if XYZ user is trying to create a bucket and modifying the permission from here itself, right? So if I say next and if I say create bucket, then we will only receive the create bucket notification. So if we look at the CloudWatch logs, so here we are. Now here we are getting an error saying access denied. So we need to give the permission to the Lambda function so that it can put a public access, right? So it can set the public access blocks. So we will go back to the IAM management console. So we will click on roles. We will search for the IAM role that we have created. So that is basically S3 underscore public, Lambda S3 public. And here we will say attach policies. We will give full access of S3, basically S3. And I will say attach policy. Now once we are done with this, I will go back to CloudWatch logs and delete all the logs. Delete. So now again back to S3, we will create a bucket here. So create a bucket, I will give some random name. I will say next. Now here we are going to uncheck this block all public access, and I will say I acknowledge and next, and I will say create bucket. Now let's go back to CloudWatch log. Maybe I will close this. I will reopen the logs. Monitoring, view logs in CloudWatch. So here we have a log. So let's open this. So here we have two events, right? So two execution of the Lambda function. So let's look at the first one. So here the very first event that was occurred is the create bucket event, right? Now within create bucket, we don't have the information about the public access block, right? So that's the reason we don't know whether the user or the XYZ user has changed those permission or not, right? So that's the reason within this Lambda function, what we are doing is, since we are unaware, we are checking for the create bucket event and we are setting all those for blocks to true. So in case if the user is modifying this permission, right, he is setting certain blocks to false. So that's the reason we are enforcing that thing using Lambda function to set all the blocks as true, right? So that was the first event that occurred. Now let me close this. Now here we have the second event, that is basically put bucket public access blocks. So why this event triggered? Because within Lambda function, what we did is we set the public access block. We executed the put public access block, right? And that event basically triggered the Where is that? Here it is, right? It triggered the put bucket public access block. Now once that is done, it will check for certain things. If the things are in place, then it's not going to send an email, right? So that's where we have two events. So here we are just making sure that while creating the bucket, if the user has modified those permission, we are setting it to true, right? Now here, if we look at this bucket permission, then you will see all the setting is on, right? Though while creating the bucket, I had set them to false, right? Because we are modifying that permission using the Lambda function. Correct. Now once the bucket is created, he can go ahead and modify certain things and we will have the notification in place, right? Even if we go ahead and modify the access control list, then also we have some sort of notification in place. So that's the reason we have this create bucket event, and we are setting these things to true. I hope that AWS might bring or might provide that information within the event itself in future, right? So, well, now here the user might take time to act based on the notification, right? So here any user change certain things and I'm receiving the notification. So I might take some time to act upon that in case if something is wrong, right? So that's kind of the drawback. But now, for example, if you want to restrict other users to change permission or you want them to comply with certain set of rules, then you can enforce those rules using AWS config service for the same, right? So I just wanted to highlight that. So well, that's all I wanted to cover in this tutorial. And till that time, if you want me to do tutorial on any use case or service, then please leave them below and I will try my best to come up with a tutorial as soon as possible. And if you have any queries or comments, then again please leave them below and don't